Watch closely. He walked the Appalachian Trail for over a year. Dozens of people saw him at hostels, around campfires, at trail crossings. He wasn't hiding, he wasn't running, but no one knew his name. He didn't use a phone, he didn't take photos, he paid in cash, left no digital trace. And when his body was discovered in a tent, everyone realized this was no ordinary hiker. His backpack held food, water, a first aid kit. No name, no phone, no ID, just one notebook. Inside, not a route, not contacts, but strange charts. Agility 8. Resolve 10. Silence max. As if he wasn't a person, but a character, nameless, on a mission, and the only signature, mostly harmless. If you'd met him, would you have asked the right question, or simply kept walking by? Why would someone with education, a job, a home, choose to vanish, not from someone, but from everyone? And the real question, if he could erase himself almost completely. How many other nobodies have we already missed? He died inside a perfectly good tent in the shadow of trees, just minutes away from a well-known hiking trail. He had plenty of food, water, a purifier, an insulated sleeping bag, and a backpack filled with gear bought only weeks before his death. But there wasn't a single document, no personal item, no photo, no phone, no numbers, no maps, no keys, nothing that could tell who he was, where he lived, where he'd come from, or why he ended up there. He lay on his side, still and peaceful, without a mark or bruise. The only thing by his hand was a notebook. Instead of names or contacts, it contained fragments of code, stat charts, probably for game characters, with names like Veril and Tink. On the first page, written in lowercase, mostly harmless, as if that name didn't need emphasis. On July 23, 2018, park staff at Big Cypress in Florida got a call from a pair of hikers. Near a remote campsite on the eastern stretch of the trail, they'd found a tent locked from the inside, with no one coming or going for days. They had no idea they were about to stumble onto one of the most baffling and mysterious cases of a disappearance in the wild. At first, it looked routine. A man who didn't answer shouts, didn't unzip the door, didn't move. When the rangers carefully opened the tent and looked inside, they understood immediately. The man was dead. His body showed almost no signs of decay. He'd probably died only a day or two before. There were no signs of struggle, no panic, no evidence of violence, vomiting, blood, or seizures. Everything pointed to a calm passing. His face showed no trace of horror or pain. In fact, his features were relaxed, eyes gently closed, lying as if asleep. The Colusa County Police arrived 3 hours later and recorded the basic details. Male, about 35 to 45 years old, solidly built, weighing around 80 kilograms, height about 1.80 meters. His clothes were clean and neat, free of stains or damage. On his feet, mid-range hiking boots, nearly new, size 43. His beard was neatly trimmed, hair medium length and tidy, and there were marks on his hands where he'd carried a backpack and worn a wrist strap. But the big thing, there was no ID in his pockets, no bank card, no driver's license, no documents at all. Not a single note or route log, no phone, no camera. When police checked him against missing persons databases, nothing matched. Fingerprints didn't appear in any federal or criminal records. DNA, unidentified. The only clue to his inner world was that notebook. On the first 3 pages, there were charts listing stats like agility, intellect, resolve, and endurance. Next to each trait, numbers as if pulled straight from a tabletop RPG character sheet. Then came lists of names, races, and details. Tink, lives near ruins. Oren, searching for a way out. Veril, doesn't trust people. Some entries were crossed out and rewritten. The last pages were blank. The signature, mostly harmless, appeared twice, once at the start, again in the middle. There was nothing that could reveal who the writer was. no doodles, just simple pencil and neat handwriting. Analysis suggested these notes weren't rushed or stressed, more likely written slowly, in thought. The style was structured, the pages clean, free of moisture or damage. Later, after photos of the man spread across social media, a wave of stories surfaced from people who'd seen him. For almost a year, he'd walked the Appalachian Trail alone, showing up in different places. People remembered him as calm, reserved, not talkative, but never unfriendly. He was someone nobody saw as lost or in need of help. He moved with confidence, looked healthy, and was always alone. At hostels, he paid cash, kept to himself, avoided small talk. Sometimes he'd say he worked in IT, but never went into details. One hiker recalled him saying, "I just want to walk to the end. No maps, no noise, nothing extra." That was where the investigation stalled. None of the theories, from mental illness to running from someone, fit the facts. He didn't look sick. His behavior showed no signs of distress. He wasn't aggressive, didn't seem exhausted, wasn't asking for help. But it was clear he had made every effort to erase his identity. And that's how he ended, dead in a tent, with nothing besides standard gear and one strange notebook. On the third day after his body was found, the routine search began, interviewing possible witnesses and mapping out the route he might have taken before dying. Investigators contacted the National Park Service and started tracing his expected journey from the southern edge of the Appalachian Trail, where he'd first been spotted in March 2017, up to the south of Florida, where his tent was found. Since his identity was unknown, the only way to track him was through accounts of people who'd met him along the way, and that quickly became the main challenge. Almost everyone who crossed paths with him on the trail described the same features: tall, lean, carrying a medium-sized backpack, dressed plainly with no bright colors, patches, tags, or badges. He never traveled in large groups, usually kept his distance even in common resting areas. He didn't seek out contact but didn't refuse it either when approached. When asked his name, he'd say, "You can call me mostly Harmless." Some took it as a joke, others believed it was his real name and didn't question it. He was polite, showed no aggression, didn't seem confused. He had no phone, at least no one ever saw him use one. This fact immediately raised suspicion. In modern long-distance hiking, especially on the Appalachian Trail, being completely off the grid isn't just a sign of simplicity, it's a risk. Even those avoiding technology usually carry trackers or emergency beacons just in case. But mostly Harmless didn't just lack gadgets. Witnesses said he refused them on principle. One person who met him near Springer offered to share a phone map, but the man politely declined, saying he navigated by memory. In a more worrying incident, a shelter worker noticed the man hadn't signed in as required and asked him to write his name. He replied, "I don't need to be on any list. I'm only here briefly." Based on these clues, police began piecing together an informal timeline of his movements. The rough sequence went like this. He appeared in Georgia in spring 2017, then moved northward, showing up in the Carolinas, then Virginia. Summer saw him near Shenandoah, then he headed south again. He was spotted at several points, sometimes moving distances in a single day that would take others 2 or 3 days. Encounters happened on both the eastern and western parts of the trail, as if he changed direction spontaneously, ignoring the usual flow. One hiker noticed something else important. He never carried a paper map, but rarely got lost. When someone offered to show him where the nearest spring was, he pointed the way without looking, explained the path, and was right. It seemed like he already knew the route, but didn't use the common navigation tools others relied on. This led to the theory that he wasn't just a tourist, but someone who knew the area well, possibly a former park ranger or military. However, no employee lists, active or retired, matched his appearance or biometric data. The Missing Persons Unit compared his appearance to over 400 open cases from the past decade. Cases involving runaways, broken social ties, disappearances linked to mental breakdowns, but none matched his profile. Even assuming he altered his looks, shaved his head, grew a beard, lost weight, his body build, bite, and skull shape ruled out every existing record. He didn't resemble a single wanted person. More strikingly, no one who saw his photo online said, "That's my son," "That's my brother," or "I know who that is." Not a single one. It was as if he existed only on the trail and nowhere else. At the same time, experts examining his belongings found another strange detail. At the bottom of his backpack was a plastic package from a medical kit with no labeling. The label had been torn off, and the remnants wiped clean with alcohol. This kind of thing happens when a person doesn't want barcodes or batch numbers to reveal where the item was bought. The medicines themselves were standard: bandages, iodine, headache pills, antiseptic. But none had any manufacturer marks or packaging codes left. It was like everything had been put through an information removal filter. Food packaging, cans, sealed bags, powders also had no stickers. Most products were either unbranded, bought in bulk, or cleaned beforehand. No lab worker could trace their point of purchase. This didn't seem accidental, more like a system, a deliberate effort to erase digital and physical traces. A new theory emerged. Maybe Mostly Harmless wasn't just a nickname. Maybe it was a role, a conscious attempt to live like someone who leaves almost no noise behind. And if so, then his death wasn't random. He died where he decided to stop. And if that was part of the plan, then everything found nearby was deliberate. Meaning, the notebook was the key. The notebook found beside his body immediately caught the investigation team's attention because amid the complete absence of any other personal traces, digital or physical, it seemed the only real point of access to the deceased's identity. At a glance, the notebook looked ordinary, about A6 size, soft cover, several dozen pages, some filled with pencil writing. The pages weren't torn out, cover undamaged, corners slightly bent, but no signs of moisture or mechanical wear. On the back, no name, no date, not even a hint of an owner. The paper was plain, without any watermarks. At first glance, the notebook's contents looked like a collection of strange personal notes, not directly related to the trail or daily tasks. In the first third, there were tables listing numerical traits arranged in rows: agility, resolve, intellect, stealth, charisma. Each had numbers from 1 to 10, grouped like character cards or RPG stats. Nearby were names: Verrill, Tink, Oren, Noon, Hushed. Their specialties were listed separately: recon, hacking, alchemy, persuasion. One table highlighted the name Hushed with maxed out scores in silence and patience. On the next page, a crossed-out phrase read, "Invisibility is not in the shadow, but in the absence of a map." Police analysts suggested this might be the script of a role-playing game, maybe a home campaign, a text RPG, or just a mental experiment. But on a deeper level, the structure showed clear systematization. These weren't random scribbles. The numbers were neat, handwritten with careful alignment, no smudges. In some places, the handwriting and pencil pressure varied, showing the notes were made over time, not in one day. Also, the pencil found in his backpack perfectly matched the marks on the paper, the same graphite, the same sharpening. Most likely, he wrote these notes himself. Midway through the notebook, a different pattern emerged. Short dialogues appeared, written like game scenes. Your name? No name. Why do you walk alone? Because no one walks to the end. These snippets were interrupted by lists. Destination? Unknown. Path? Nonlinear. Rules? None. Psycholinguists called to analyze the text found an intriguing pattern. The notebook's phrasing matched the speech style of several witnesses who had met this man on the trail. Some said he spoke briefly, with pauses, sometimes quoting strange lines like, "The best way to be safe is to be unnoticed," or, "He who walks without a name leaves no trace." One hiker who encountered him near Smoky Lake recalled how, one night by the campfire, the man was writing something in the notebook while looking at the sky, and said aloud, "Every step is subtraction, not addition." At the time, it seemed like a strange metaphor. Now, it feels like a recurring theme. On the last written page of the notebook was a short sentence. "If you're reading this, then I've already arrived." And that was it. No dates, no explanations. The final 8 pages were blank. Some showed slight impressions, like faint writing or calculations, but nothing legible. Photometric analysis revealed nothing. There was no ink, only graphite. The paper was slightly yellowed, but not worn. The pages weren't trimmed, the staples untouched. Everything looked prepared, yet, at the same time, intentionally left behind. Investigators searched for clues. Some thought the notebook was a code, or a cipher, or a diary written like a role-playing narrative. But the deeper they looked, the more it became clear. The notebook was not a path to answers, but a continuation of the very intention, capturing a way of thinking, not events. It didn't give information, it erased it. It didn't help you understand. It showed how impossible it is to understand when a person doesn't want to be understood. Meanwhile, online, the image of this bearded man with a tired but calm gaze, created by police and digitally enhanced specialists, started gaining popularity. The photo, uploaded to the Unidentified Persons database, spread across Reddit forums, Facebook, and several hiking communities. Within a week, reports began pouring in from people who said they had kind of seen him. Confirmations varied. Some claimed to have met him at a shelter in Carolina. Others said he sat by a campfire atop Katahdin. Several reported he might have stopped by a cafe in Georgia, near the trailhead as early as 2016. Some remembered his voice, others his gait. Someone even said they talked with him about programming. But no one, absolutely no one, could name his real identity. Day by day, the list of witnesses grew, but the list of facts did not expand. All anyone knew was that this man had walked nearly a year and a half, leaving behind almost no traces, never taking a step toward connecting with the outside world. He didn't use the internet, didn't visit post offices, didn't try to make contacts. His entire existence on the trail was within sight, but beyond any recorded interaction. He was there, but not in the world we live in. Between April and July of 2017, based on collected witness accounts and indirect data, such as purchase dates of certain food items, mostly Harmless traveled along the main stretch of the Appalachian Trail within Georgia and North Carolina. He avoided crowded areas and refused to stay overnight in shelters that required registration. Over the next 8 months, according to more than 20 eyewitnesses, he not only passed key points on the trail, but repeatedly appeared where cameras were set up. However, most videos failed to clearly identify him due to poor image quality or because he wasn't in the frame. The only confirmed footage was a short video recorded on a GoPro by a traveler near Roan Mountain. The silhouette matched his build and gait, but his face was indistinguishable. In the clip, he walked about 20 meters from the operator, did not look toward the camera, didn't stop, and gave no reason for interaction. This became an important detail. Mostly Harmless displayed consistent passive isolation on the trail. He didn't overtly avoid people, but made no effort to engage. Psychologists involved in the case noted that this behavior is typical for individuals with controlled forms of autism or borderline personality disorder. However, further study ruled out other signs of these conditions. Witnesses described his speech as even, clear, and logical. His answers were thoughtful. His behavior wasn't gloomy or nervous. He didn't give the impression of someone suffering from mania or paranoia. One person who spent more than a few minutes with him was a staff member at a private hostel in Virginia, where mostly Harmless stayed overnight in June 2017. According to the employee, the man paid cash for the room, declined dinner, but asked for hot water to prepare his food. He spent the evening sitting quietly in a corner of the common room, flipping through his notebook, drinking water, occasionally looking up, but never initiating conversation. When the receptionist asked him to fill out the standard form, name, hometown, planned route, he neatly wrote, MH, mobile, solo, none. Then he returned the pen, thanked her, and went to his room. The next morning, he left first, without saying goodbye. The bed was neatly made, trash collected and thrown away. The owner described him as like an engineer or soldier used to discipline, but deciding to no longer be part of the system. Later, in fall 2017, mostly Harmless was spotted near the West Virginia border, but less regularly. Some witnesses claimed to see him on southern sections of the trail. Others said he appeared farther north, near Pennsylvania. This raised suspicion. If true, he either used transportation, which contradicted his habit of avoiding technology, or he knew routes that allowed him to bypass long sections on foot, possibly through abandoned logging roads or closed trails. Either way, this suggested a higher level of preparation than previously thought. He wasn't seen at all during the winter. This marked the first major gap in the investigation. There were no confirmed sightings from December 2017 to March 2018. 3 months, complete silence. The weather was harsh then, with relentless rain and temperatures dropping to freezing in the mountains. That meant he either left the trail or found shelter out of sight. In spring 2018, he reappeared, this time in southern Florida. It came as a shock. The Appalachian Trail ends in Maine, while Big Cypress Park lies some 600 kilometers south of its starting point. None of the witnesses could confirm seeing him anywhere in the southeast during that period. So either he had walked from Maine to Florida without a single contact, physically possible but highly unlikely, or for some reason he left the trail and got there by other means. No one in South Carolina, Georgia, or Central Florida reported seeing him. How he ended up in the reserve remains unknown. Ranger James Layton, the first to spot the tent where the body was found, said there was no sign of an emergency from a distance. The tent stood upright, the tarp was taut, and the stakes were secure. He linked the lack of movement to the heat. Only after a few days did other hikers notice no one appeared behind the tent, the door wasn't opened, and there were no fresh tracks around the grass. He didn't try to get out, didn't call for help, didn't signal. And strangest of all, he left no sign of distress. Autopsy results showed his body temperature was lowered at the time of death, but not critically so. No signs of hypothermia, no indications of heart failure or stroke. Organs were healthy. Blood showed no toxins. The only conclusion forensic experts reached: death came from starvation following a voluntary refusal to eat or drink, even though everything needed to survive was within reach. In other words, he didn't die by accident. He stopped by choice. After the photo of the man was published online, along with a brief summary of his discovery and estimated date of death, an avalanche of activity erupted on the internet. It started in hiking and backpacking communities, then spread to major Reddit forums like r Unresolved Mysteries, r Backpacking, and r Let's Talk Trail, where the story of the unknown hiker quickly became a top discussion topic. People shared old photos from their own trips, reviewed videos, and recounted stories where, it turned out, a silent companion in a gray t-shirt with no name had indeed been nearby. The more these reports appeared, the clearer the paradox became. Over a year and a half, mostly Harmless crossed paths with dozens, if not hundreds, of people, yet not one asked him the direct question, who was he really? Some internet investigators began organizing the information. A Reddit user called A. Kelsey Woods created an open Google map plotting approximate last sightings of the man based on over 50 reports. The analysis showed that his route was not straight or typical for someone planning to hike the Appalachian Trail. He seemed to deliberately avoid popular sections crowded with hikers, but didn't disappear into complete wilderness. His path ran along edges, near water, along service trails, places without cameras or official checkpoints. It was as if he was seeking a balance between visibility and disappearance, to be in view but out of focus. Stranger coincidences surfaced. A tabletop role-playing game forum user reported that between 2013 and 2015, on a small English-language site for indie RPG developers, there was a user named MH33 who posted campaign scripts with character names matching those found in the man's notebook. The campaigns were short but structured, a character removed from the world, wandering without purpose, avoiding conflict, lacking identity, and disappearing at the end without a trace. The author actively commented on others' ideas, but shared almost nothing about himself. The last post was dated July 2016, just months before Mostly Harmless first appeared on the trail. Several digital volunteers helping verify this started tracking IP addresses, domain records, and forum metadata. But the MH33 account had long been inactive, with no links to a name or email. All that emerged was the author used an anonymizer, logged in irregularly, and left no technical traces that could reveal location. This fueled suspicion. Maybe this wasn't just someone who decided to disappear, but someone who planned it carefully, with cold calculation and digital savvy. Meanwhile, reports began coming from across the country from people who believed they knew this man. One claimed to have worked with him at a software company in New York. Another said they attended college together in Louisiana. And a third said they met him back in the mid-2000s. All these statements sounded believable at first, but upon investigation, they either couldn't be confirmed or fell apart. Dates didn't match. Appearances didn't align. Life details conflicted. It felt like he had erased his traces so thoroughly that even people's memories began to doubt. Did he even exist? The online community spun theories, from the most logical to outright conspiratorial. Some believed he was a former intelligence agent staging his disappearance. Others thought he was running from debt or threats. Some suggested it was an experiment, a social project testing how far someone could go without an identity and whether their death would even matter. Amid all these interpretations, one thing remained clear. Though he died quietly, alone, his lack of a name became louder than any scream. The investigation, however, stayed grounded in facts. In May 2020, a second examination of his backpack and clothes was conducted with microparticle specialists. The goal was to try to identify the geographic origins of the items: fabric fibers from the backpack, organic residues on the shoe soles, soil particles trapped inside the tent zipper. The report delivered to the Colusa Department indicated most traces were typical for the trail through Georgia, the Carolinas, and southern Virginia. However, one fragment found inside the shoe matched soil from New York State, where Mostly Harmless was never spotted during the supposed time of travel. This didn't rule out an earlier route before he appeared in the South. It suggested that before the final leg of his journey, he might have moved across the country, testing the path. Or, more likely, he arrived in the South after long preparation, wiping away all traces of his past life. This wasn't a spontaneous hike. This was a planned operation of self-reset. One detective on the case told a local newspaper, "We never felt like this was just someone who forgot their papers. Everything around him, from the cut labels to the anonymous food and erased batch numbers, shows this was done deliberately, ahead of time. He didn't lose his name, he deleted it. By the end of 2020, despite numerous attempts, official agencies still couldn't identify the man. His profile was removed from missing persons databases as unconfirmed. Fingerprints, repeatedly uploaded to the federal AFIS system, showed no matches, not even partial ones, in immigration records, military registries, or social programs. One technical expert involved called the result a ghost person, a profile without history, biometrics without ties, DNA with no database record. Frustrated by the repeated dead ends, the Colusa County Police handed the case over to the National Center for Missing and Unidentified Persons Unit. For the first time, a private lab named Othram was officially brought in. Specializing in genetic identification through microgenomic analysis, Othram had access to private voluntary DNA databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA. This raised hopes. If even a distant relative was in the system, identification could be possible. The process began with extracting bone material, a femur sample kept at Tampa's forensic lab. 2 weeks later, the lab confirmed the DNA was suitable for building a genetic family tree. The entire process took over 2 months. The system started mapping distant matches, linking the profile to possible third- and fourth-degree relatives, mostly from the southern United States. No direct relatives were found, but one profile, a man from Louisiana who had previously uploaded his data to Family Tree DNA, showed a partial mitochondrial match. The connection was strong enough for the lab to take the next step, building an approximate family tree and identifying a potential region where the unidentified man's father or uncle might have lived. This became the first real breakthrough in nearly 3 years. The lab sent letters to potential relatives and shared copies with local law enforcement. One recipient, a man named Ronald Rodriguez from Lafayette, Louisiana, responded after 3 weeks. He didn't know about the deceased, but his story became key. He said he had a cousin the family had lost contact with over 10 years ago. His name was Vance Rodriguez. According to Ronald, Vance was a reserved, intelligent man working in IT. In recent years, he lived in southern New York, but had little contact with family. He didn't attend gatherings, rarely answered calls, and eventually disappeared. Officially, no missing person report was filed. The family believed he had simply withdrawn into himself, as he had done before. Ronald also mentioned that Vance was interested in tabletop role-playing games and enjoyed creating his own game systems, where characters had no names, only stats. Vance often said, "People overvalue names, functions matter more than biography." After receiving this information, a second biological comparison was made. Vance's DNA profile, verified through his uncle's lineage, matched the sample taken from mostly Harmless. The match was 100%. In March 2021, it was officially confirmed. The body found in Big Cypress in July 2018 belonged to Vance Rodriguez, born in 1976, a native of Louisiana, who had spent his last years living in New York. When the name was known, the investigation returned to standard procedures, reviewing history, analyzing ties, checking credit, and employment records. It was found that Vance really worked as a system administrator at a small tech company in Manhattan. In 2016, he resigned voluntarily, without explanation. He had no criminal record or psychiatric history. His medical file was clean. Banks showed zero activity. Social media accounts were empty. His apartment lease was terminated for unpaid rent 9 months after his disappearance. His phone line was disconnected. His mailbox canceled. Interviews with former colleagues revealed that in the last months, Vance had become distant, stopped attending meetings, turned off all computer notifications, switched to paper notes, and asked not to be contacted via work email. One coworker recalled him saying, "I don't think people need that much data. I don't need to be online to exist." His former boss described him as very smart but internally closed off, someone who just disappeared one day. She said he never talked about family, avoided group lunches, and didn't share personal details. He left without saying goodbye, leaving his desk clean, his account closed, and a password written on paper. Mostly harmless. After identifying him, investigators tried to reconstruct the last 2 years of Vance Rodriguez's life before he appeared on the southern Appalachian Trail. This was crucial to understand whether his route showed signs of fleeing, preparation, or, as suspected, was part of a pre-planned operation. The official biography confirmed basic facts. Born in 1976 in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. His parents were alive, but had no contact with him. Childhood was typical, with no records of crimes, illnesses, or running away. He attended a state college, earned a technical degree, then moved to the northeastern United States. Since 2003, he lived in New York, switching between several IT companies, mainly working in support and systems administration. Up to this point, his life seemed ordinary. Real changes began around 2014 to 15. According to colleagues, Vance started showing clear behavioral shifts. He didn't break rules or cause conflicts, but systematically refused new communication methods, moving back to manual task management. He skipped meetings and corporate events, declined to join internal social networks, ignored surveys, and switched to paper notebooks instead of built-in digital systems. One office mate said, "It was like he was winding back toward an older, more manual, more isolated version of life, where nothing demanded participation in the system." From 2016, this behavior intensified. Vance disabled his work email, answered calls selectively, kept his personal phone on airplane mode, and cut all contact with relatives, a fact later confirmed by his family. He rented a small loft on the edge of town, lived alone, refused subscriptions, bought groceries only in person, and paid cash. When his landlord tried to set up online rent payments, Rodriguez insisted on handing over the envelope through the door crack. He stopped visiting crowded places, stopped taking taxis, and walked everywhere, even in rain and cold. A former colleague saw him in spring 2017 and said he looked not poor, not dangerous, not sick, just completely detached, as if everything around him no longer mattered. Weeks before quitting, he deleted his timekeeping account, returned his access card, handed in equipment, and when asked, "What's next?" said only, "To walk what I should have long ago." His resignation form was blank, including reason for leaving and emergency contact. His last action in the office system was manually deleting his user account via terminal with a log comment. Exit. 0. Neighbors recalled his apartment never had visitors. He left early in the morning or late at night. He went shopping alone, carrying no bags, sometimes returning with canned goods, grains, cheap freeze-dried food. 3 months before disappearing, he started ordering gear through Craigslist, arranging hand-to-hand pickups, a sleeping bag, tent, cooking pot, backpack. No receipts, no official shipments. One seller said he came on foot, refused help, and when offered packaging, replied, "Better this way. Packaging leaves marks." During this time, he also sold his laptop through the same platform. The buyer, a student who purchased the device, reported that when turning it on, he found no system files on the hard drive. The drive had been completely wiped with a low-level reset. The BIOS was restored to factory settings. The entire structure was erased, leaving behind only a text folder named "Nothing Inside." Around the same period, he stopped using his bank card. First, he zeroed out the balance, then closed the account. Access to his email was cut off. Messages stopped opening. Even automatic notifications failed. At some point, he disappeared from all digital spaces. as if someone pressed the delete button and erased every trace of his past. No official missing persons report was filed. No one, family, colleagues, or neighbors, reported him missing. He simply vanished from urban life and appeared on the trail. The exact moment he set off is unknown. The first confirmed encounters with him were months later, on the southern section of the Appalachian Trail. Perhaps he spent time scouting the route before that. Maybe he stayed in campsites. Possibly he began his journey weeks earlier than suspected. But from spring 2017, he was on the move. Everything that followed, tents, hostels, canned food, conversations with fellow hikers, the notebook with stats, and the name, mostly Harmless, was not the result of improvisation, but a logical continuation of a process started many months before. His disappearance wasn't spontaneous. It was the systematic dismantling of his own life, done manually, step by step. After confirming his identity and establishing a full biographical record, including school records, medical history, work history, and residence, Vance Rodriguez's case, the previously unknown man known as mostly Harmless, entered its administrative closure phase. The Colusa County Police notified family members of the findings, issued the official death certificate, and closed the case as unsupported by signs of foul play. All materials were archived, and the body was cremated per the family's decision, who declined a public ceremony. At this stage, it seemed the story had reached its end. The name was found, the path retraced, the identity confirmed. Yet everyone involved in the investigation was left with one lingering question. Why would a man with a normal life, stable career, health, education, and social opportunities choose a path leading not only to physical disappearance, but to complete erasure from information? Psychologists familiar with cases like this call it structured self-deletion, when a person systematically dismantles all channels of identification, not only external ones like phones, documents, and bank records, but also internal ones, name, attachments, social memory. Yet even for such rare cases, Vance Rodriguez's behavior remained almost clinically clean. He didn't just vanish. He did it methodically, almost like following a pre-written script, where every step was a logical part of the overall process. There was no chaos, no confusion, no signs of depression, bitterness, rebellious rhetoric, or emotional breakdown. Everything was orderly, chronological, technically precise. When the investigation closed, a second wave began: the public. Journalists, bloggers, and documentarians started treating the case as a unique example of voluntary identity loss. Short films were made, articles written, podcasts created. One episode of a well-known American radio show featured a phrase later quoted by dozens of outlets: "He didn't disappear. He showed us how it's done." Pages mapped his route, graphs and behavior charts appeared, psychological analyses of the notebook, collective theories, and even the idea that his actions were a form of digital protest against total surveillance. Yet the official version remained unchanged. For unknown reasons, the man withdrew from society, methodically wiped all identification channels, walked part of the Appalachian Trail, reached the southern Florida Reserve, and died of exhaustion and dehydration while carrying everything he needed to continue his journey. No signs of violence were found, no medical causes either. The final case conclusion read, "Natural death, intentional refusal of sustenance." The most uncomfortable fact for investigators was that all theories, medical or forensic, crashed against one key point. He died not because he couldn't survive, but because he didn't want to continue. He had water, he had food, he could have gotten up, walked, reached the nearest trail. But he lay down in his tent, wrapped himself in a sleeping bag, put the notebook beside him, and did nothing more. The last attempts to analyze the notebook brought no new insights. Its meaningful phrases were checked against books, forums, game dialogues, but showed no direct borrowing. Even the phrase, mostly harmless, used as a name, carried no single meaning. It might be a nod to Douglas Adams' book, but it wasn't certain. The style of the tables resembled game systems, but was original. Everything appeared to be a personal code, not taken from outside, but assembled from his own beliefs and logic. His name in the database was marked as Identified. The profile was closed, family members notified, place of death recorded, cause stated. The system closed the case. Yet online, in forums comments, he continued to live. The photo of him sitting on a slope by his tent, notebook open, with a tired gaze, became a silent icon. He was called the Nameless Man who proved a name isn't necessary. The final document closing the case spans 3 pages. The first page has his name, birth date, death date, cause, and address. The second lists items found on him: tent, sleeping bag, backpack, notebook, 3 cans of food, water bottle, rubber bowl, steel pot. The third page concludes the impossibility of determining intent. There were no other words in the file. After repeated genetic procedures, the man's body was cremated and handed to his closest relative, a paternal uncle living in Louisiana. The remains were not publicly buried. The exact place of storage or burial was kept confidential. The family declined a ceremony, avoided media statements, and answered journalists' inquiries briefly. He chose to be alone. We respect that choice. Of the 74 witnesses contacted along Vance's route, more than half described him as balanced, calm, physically strong, showing no signs of distress. All noted a lack of obvious illness, fear, or confusion. He didn't ask for help, didn't ask for food, didn't seek company. He moved purposefully, step by step, following not an external trail, but an inner logic no one could explain. Evidence, the notebook, food, clothes, tent, pot, packages, was archived as items with no legal value, but of interest for potential future research. Notebook entries became part of the case file. They contained no direct identification, no dates, no coordinates. Only names, numbers, conditional values, and one phrase repeated 3 times. If you're reading this, then I have arrived. Investigators concluded the notebook contained no codes or passwords. According to forensic experts, the writing style suggested a strong internal structure. The man was not delusional, confused, or cognitively impaired. He kept the notebook like a navigation log or sequence of actions, steady, calm, without digressions. After all procedures were complete, the case was assigned the status, completed, no crime, no ongoing risk. The official Nameless database recorded the case under NWP 48736, marked Identified, no criminal activity, finalized. But beyond the archives, beyond the official records and bureaucratic system, remained the reality where it all began. A man who traveled through 9 states without leaving a single digital footprint, a single mark, a post, or a photo taken by himself. All that remains of him